On July 20th, 2026, the streets of New Delhi disappeared under thick clouds of tear gas. Out of that smoke marched ranks of riot police, advancing on a sprawling crowd in the heart of the capital. The Rapid Action Force deployed with heavy equipment. They fired tear gas canisters directly into the crowds and launched aggressive strikes with lathis, the long, heavy wooden batons used by Indian police for crowd control. But the target of this assault was highly unusual. Look at the people sitting on the ground here. These are not insurgents. They are unarmed medical students, along with their parents and families, sitting defensively on the pavement. It takes massive authorization and coordination to deploy a military-style crackdown in a national capital. We have to ask why the state felt compelled to use this level of force against its own aspiring doctors. 2 months earlier, these students sat for the NEET exam, India's highly competitive gateway into medical school. Over 2.2 million applicants had spent years preparing, only to discover days later that the exam paper had been leaked and sold on Telegram. Their hard work was erased mid-instant. When frustrated students demanded accountability, the youth felt dismissed by the authorities, who allegedly referred to the protesting crowds as cockroaches. Instead of retreating, the students embraced the insult. They formed a satirical group called the Cockroach Janta Party to demand the education minister's resignation. By late June, they set up an ongoing, completely peaceful sit-in at Jantar Mantar, an historic observatory in Delhi designated for protests. For weeks, the government simply ignored them. That calculation broke on June 28th, when renowned social activist Sonam Wangchuk arrived at the site. He sat down and began an indefinite hunger strike. As Wangchuk rapidly lost weight over the next 2 weeks, images of his declining health flooded social media. The movement absorbed national sympathy. A localized annoyance had suddenly mutated into a massive public relations crisis for the government, triggering a drastic surgical response. The crackdown began on July 17th with an administrative shock. The Delhi police commissioner, who was a year away from retirement, was abruptly removed. In his place, the government installed an IPS officer fresh from his role as Special Director of the Intelligence Bureau. This new leadership immediately designed a 30-second covert extraction plan. This diagram outlines their strategy: 3 distinct layers of security forces targeting the main stage, timed precisely for an early morning window when Wangchuk's volunteers were known to be absent. At 6:30 a.m., plainclothes officers disguised in medical scrubs stormed the stage. They threw up a wall of white sheets to block any smartphone cameras, grabbed Wangchuk against his will, and dragged him to a waiting ambulance. He was taken directly to Safdarjung Hospital. The government's official explanation stated this was simply a medical intervention to protect a citizen's health, mandated by a court order. Wangchuk's family noted his potassium levels were normal the day prior. By utilizing intelligence directors and visual blackout tactics, the government removed the movement's head, while ensuring no clear photographic record of the abduction ever reached the public. The extraction backfired immediately. From inside the hospital, Wangchuk managed to smuggle out a handwritten note detailing his detention. He urged the students to launch a massive march on Parliament the very next day. Delhi police scrambled into a total physical lockdown. They invoked Section 163, officially banning all public gatherings of 5 or more people. They immediately shut down 5 central metro stations and began welding 10-foot heavy steel barricades directly into the asphalt. To prevent the thousands of inbound students from coordinating, the state initiated a digital siege. This graphic shows how authorities deployed communication jammers across the entire central Delhi zone, wiping out mobile internet access and cell service at 150 different sites. But the students adapted. They switched their phones to offline mesh networks using apps like Briar and BitchChat. By utilizing long-range Bluetooth, their devices communicated directly with each other, completely bypassing the government's jammed cell towers. The government's strategy isolated the protesters, but completely failed to stop them from arriving. By attempting to blind and deafen a massive, angry crowd, the state didn't disperse them. Instead, it practically guaranteed a chaotic, violent collision. By the morning of July 20th, the fatal flaw in the state's lockdown became obvious. With Wangchuk in the hospital and the student spokespeople detained in separate police stations, the massive crowds had absolutely no one to direct them or keep the peace. Trapped inside blocked metro stations and penned in by the barricades, the frustration of the leaderless youth boiled over. They surged forward, breaking through the physical checkpoints and pushing directly toward the Parliament building. The police response was instant and brutal. Officers had intentionally removed their nameplates to avoid identification. Alongside men in plainclothes, they charged the students, firing tear gas indiscriminately, even hitting protesters who were sitting peacefully on the ground. In the middle of this chaos, protesters stumbled upon a heavily damaged truck loaded with bricks and stones, parked right outside Jantar Mantar. The entire area had been sealed by police for hours, making it impossible for a civilian vehicle to enter without permission. By detaining the leaders and jamming all coordination, the authorities effectively engineered the very chaos they needed to authorize a violent crackdown. By the end of the day, the streets were cleared. Hundreds of protesters and police officers were injured. Dozens of students were detained, and Parliament remained untouched behind its iron gates. The state successfully demonstrated its immense power. It proved it could seamlessly replace police leadership overnight, execute flawless covert extractions, weld city blocks shut, and deploy digital jammers across a metropolis. Yet this exact same government was completely incapable of stopping a simple exam paper from leaking on a messaging app. Facing a challenge from the students its system failed, the government chose to prioritize silencing the victims over fixing the system. In the streets of New Delhi, the state waged an asymmetric war against its own children to protect a status quo it refused to fix.